Thought I'd share a couple quick tips with you guys on suspension parts. So what we've got here, this is a upper control arm for independent suspension, and it's got a ball joint where your knuckle attaches, where allows your wheel to turn, and then it's got bushings on either side, and then this is a lower control arm here where this end attaches to the frame, and then your suspension kind of pivots right there, and this is your lower ball joint. So your upper, if I can move the camera back far enough, your upper kind of pivots like that, and this one pivots at the same time. It's hard to do this with one hand. So that's how your suspension works, just two pivot points, and then your knuckle goes between the ball joints. And some quick tests or quick checks to see if your suspension parts are bad. For ball joints, one easy thing you can do is look at the boots. And if the boots are torn, or if they're completely missing, like this, you can almost guarantee that there's been water and dirt down inside there, working around inside the bearing. And then when that happens, it causes your tolerances to increase. It causes a lot of slop, a lot of movement. And so you can check. A good rule of thumb is if your boots look like that, or if your boots are gone, you might as well replace the ball joints. Another way to check is to see if there's any sort of play. And what you want to do is you want to jack your vehicle up, and then you can put a pry bar under here and lift it up and down. And if this moves independently of the ball joint, there's a little bit of wiggle in there, and you know the ball joint's bad. And usually ball joints will also make popping sounds whenever you turn. Normally when you're turning at low speeds, like turning into your driveway or turning in a parking lot or something like that, they'll pop. And that's that little bit of movement, since the internals of the ball joint are starting to wear out. And another good bet is if you have ball joints like this that don't have any sort of grease fittings where you can regularly grease them. They're supposed to be sealed for life, but as you can see, when the boots don't hold together and there's no way to put more grease in them, they're gonna go out on you. And so that's a good example of a bad ball joint. This upper one, there's nothing wrong with it. But I also don't know how old it is, so I'm changing it out because I have to do the lower one anyways. Now let's move on to bushings. So bushings are a lot easier to tell if they're going bad. You just look at them. You can see how that one's starting to crack out and how it's kind of squished to one side. It's just getting kind of wallered out. Same with the other side. The other side doesn't look as bad, but it's starting to go out. So that one needs to be replaced. Do the same thing with these bushings up here on top. Just look at the rubber, see if they're cracked or squished out or kind of cockeyed. And these bushings, they don't seem to be bad, but with upper control arms you usually have to replace the whole upper control arm altogether ball joint included. And with this lower one, it's the same deal. Some control arms you can press new ball joints in, top and bottom. Usually you just have to buy all new control arms. And they usually come with the ball joints and bushings installed. And then here's another example of a bushing that's going out. See how it's kind of squished and splitting. And then this side as well. And you can test the bushings when they're on the car too. Like if the car's sitting on the ground and there's enough room to crawl underneath, you can have someone kind of bounce the front end or the back end up and down. And then you can watch these points right here. And if they kind of move back and forth instead of rotate only, that's the only thing they're supposed to do is rotate. But if they move any other direction laterally, you know you got play in them. You need to get them swapped out. And then here's another final type of bushing. It's like a two-piece strut rod bushing, and then it's got washers that sandwich on both sides. And as you can see, it's trashed, completely trashed. So bushings are pretty easy to tell when they're going out. So moral of the story is, if your control arms have ball joints going out or bushings going out, the easiest thing to do is just get all new control arms. They come with ball joints and bushings, and then you just got to change them out. And here's an example of kind of what to check for. I'll show you here on my car. I've already replaced some of the things here, like this tie rod end. The boot's all good. It's a brand new tie rod end, so that's good. And here's your lower ball joint. Boot's intact. And what you would do is you'd wedge a pry bar in here somehow and lift up on it, see if it has any movement, see if the ball joint moves but the knuckle stays still. You know something's bad. Then you can check your sway bar end links. They have little ball joints inside of them. Upper control arm ball joint, that one's brand new. And that's it as far as ball joints. But then for your bushings, you've got your upper control arm bushings, one on each side here. Those are brand new. And then your lower control arm bushing, this is the lower control arm. This is the bushing that attaches to the frame right here. Those bushings are nice and new and good to go. And then you've got your bushing here for your shock. Those hardly ever go out. And then the strut rod bushing, this is the new one. It's a two-piece. And then the front of the strut rod goes up here to the front part of the frame, and it's another two-piece. You got one on either side, sandwiching it in. I didn't change these out because there's nothing wrong with these. Now another thing you want to make sure and do if you're going to replace suspension components, especially this, like a lower control arm, is you want to mark this bolt and washer for the lower control arm because this is how you adjust your suspension camber. It's on a eccentric, and when it rotates, it pushes your lower control arm in or out. You can kind of see the whole thing moves. That's how you adjust your alignment and whatnot. So I marked mine just like that. So I'm putting it back exactly how I took it off. But I'm still going to get an alignment. But in the meantime, while I drive around for a little bit before my alignment, it won't be off too much. Another thing you want to mark or measure, if you're putting new tie rod ends on, you want to measure the length on each side, because that'll affect your toe in and toe out, and then you can get those back pretty close to what they were, so you can drive around for a bit before you get in alignment without it completely trashing your tires or anything like that. And my final little tip here is, if you want to know if any of your suspension stuff is worn out, whether it be ball joints or bushings, without having to take your wheels off or crawl under the car, one little tip is to look at your tires, look at your alignment. If your front tires are wearing unevenly, wearing on one side and not the other, or one side of the tire, not the other, or just one side, maybe the passenger side's wearing more or the driver's side's wearing more, and if your alignment just won't stay good, you know you've got something worn out. And then you're going to have to start checking stuff. And so you can use some of those tips I was talking about earlier on what to look for when checking suspension components. It's fun stuff.